You know, you've had a session of artificial intelligence, social media, and I'm going to take you back. Is that okay? You sure? It's going back in time. I come from a very different world. So if you get bored, just raise your hand and I'll stop. Okay? It is a very, very different world. And I'm 78 today. I started my career in communications at the age of 17, writing scripts for All India Radio and for Films Division. Does anyone remember what Films Division is? Yes? You saw the weak yes. That's unfortunate what's happened to Films Division. And then at the age of 20, I finally got a job in advertising. But quite honestly, I was not trained. I didn't study advertising. I didn't study communications. Right through my life, I was bent on becoming a fighter pilot. So I learned flying. I joined the NCC Air Wing, was with them for 4 years, and then got a direct entry to the Air Force. But as fate would rule, the day of my interview, something happened over our territory, and you know where it is, where all the problems happen even today, and that was in 1959. And so I was ordered, get home. So I got home. And for 1.5 years, I was totally frustrated till finally I got a break. So it was a very different world, and at a time when the challenges we had were very different. I remember one of the hardest, most difficult tasks was educating farmers, motivating farmers to join the cooperative movement for milk. Motivating farmers and educating them on how to rear and breed cows, Indian cows, crossbred cows, buffaloes, educating and informing farmers on how to use pesticides and herbicides, and how to use protective clothing so that they don't spray it against the wind and it'll get back onto them, and as a result of which they get cancer, different kinds of skin cancers. Those are the kind of things that we did. And then also getting farmers to subscribe to IPOs for the Narmada Valley Fertilizer Project and the Indian Farmers Fertilizers Cooperative. Simultaneously, we had the opportunity of relaunching and repositioning fabulous brands like GE, like Mercedes-Benz, like Citibank, like Xerox, like Tata Motors, and the crown jewel called TCS. Ophira will remember that. We had a series, opportunities of launching a series of Indian and global brands, starting from A for Apple, right down to W for Wrigley. And that was the mix we grew up in, all right? We had the opportunity of presenting the India story of development to the heads of government of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting when it was held in Delhi. And we had the opportunity of explaining the Indian story of development to the presidents and prime ministers of the non-aligned movement, which was in existence at that time. We had the opportunity of working with the Government of India Defense Ministry, with the External Affairs Ministry, with the Prime Minister's Office, with the Food and Agriculture Ministry, because the country was near starvation after the 65 war. We had the opportunity of working on entrepreneurial development in the state of Gujarat, because Maharashtra and Gujarat were formed as one state called Bombay, and then in 1960 they got bifurcated. And then most of the industries in what then became Maharashtra were set up by Gujaratis in what became Maharashtra. And then one day I met Mr. Manubhai Shah, who at that time was the Union Commerce Minister. And we happened to sit next to each other on the aircraft flying from Delhi to Ahmedabad. And then he asked me the usual question that people used to ask in those days, as soon as you unfasten your seatbelts, what business you do? So I said, I'm in advertising. Advertising? But, so then I decided, all right, I'll tell him a nice story. I said, last week, realizing that he's a good Jew, no offense meant, he'd be interested in a product we had launched just that previous week, which was the concept of unfertilized eggs, which we promoted as vegetarian eggs. And that was my second try with advertising, combining advertising with PR. In those days, you never had press conferences for commercial. Press conferences were held only by ministers and people like that. And so we explained to journalists of Gujarati medium and Hindi medium, what unfertilized eggs are, and explained it to them, and therefore we're calling them vegetarian eggs. This was for an organization called Prabhat Poultry, which was an offshoot of Mhatre Pen and Plastics from Bombay at that time and Alibag. And that was probably the only advertising PR campaign in the world that lasted just one ad. Just one ad in Gujarat Samachar, Janmabhoomi, Navbharat Times, and of course the Times of India at that time. That's it. I know the Mac was launched once, but it covered all media. This was just these three publications that had appeared. We had prepared a whole campaign. And Mr. Mhatre said, Roger Sahib, please stop. I'm having problems. And just before that, he said, no one wants to buy these eggs because they hatch them and no chickens come out of them. That was what unfertilized eggs were all about. But that's the kind of challenges we had. In my business, in my experience, we had a different other kind of opportunities. Fighting terrorism in Assam. The Ulfa had threatened to kill every non-Assamese employee of the Dumduma tea plantation, which at that time belonged to Brookbond. And so we used to attend the auctions, and in a manner of speaking, I think we were forerunners in the amalgamation of Brookbond and Lipton, because Brookbond and Lipton used to want to go to the Guwahati Tea Exchange to bid every week, every Monday. And the Assam police said, no, we can't guarantee the safety of 20 people, 8, 9, 10 maximum. And so we said, why don't Brookbond buy for Lipton? Why don't Lipton buy for Brookbond and for each other? And that probably sowed the seeds, or rather the tea leaves, for the amalgamation. We worked on both sides of mergers for Tatas as well as Unilever, or Hindustan Lever as it was that time, during the sale of Tomco or the sale of Lakme. We worked on both sides for like Kirloskar and Cummins. We worked on both sides for demergers too. And, it was a different world. It was a world of trust, and communications people were trusted. They said, no, they'll have the interests of both of us, so why don't we work with them for both? And things worked very smoothly. Finally, I have been snatched out of the jaws of death 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I guess it was just to be with you here this afternoon. Talking about this afternoon, I have to compliment you guys, Ajit, and all of you guys here. The way things are moving, I have never seen a conference like this moving virtually to the dot. Let's stand up and give them a warm round of applause. Even international conferences, people are lagging, etc., etc. And that act just now, my God, that was unbelievable. Thank goodness I was not on that side. This is probably the first time I'm breaking my silence on my career, but it's the sincerity and the purpose of Ajit, of Hina, and Sri Lahiri that have inspired me to do so. So, Arva, let's have you on board, and let's go on with the interview.
So thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure to work with, to have this conversation with you. A couple of days ago, Amit called me and said that, Arva, I know that you're going to run our financial services panel, but maybe would you want to consider another option and have a fireside chat with Mr. Pereira? And I instantly said yes, certainly. And I'm very glad that I did that because, in this last 2 days, several people I've been meeting several of them who've worked with you at Roger Pereira, and all of them have just very fond memories to talk about.
We had a lovely time, I have to say that.
And I must therefore thank Amit, that thank you very much for choosing me. So my first question, sir, for you, and allow me to just a minute. You work, as you mentioned, you worked across the spectrum, right from the government to the multinationals. What really would inspire you then, and what inspires you today?
To give you the context, I retired from the company 9 years ago, but I haven't retired from work. During my working days, only difference is that I used to wake up at 4, now I wake up at 6.
Wow.
So I have 2 hours extra of sleep. I think the challenge of solving an issue, solving a problem, for example, I think the most satisfying experience in the PR world was the launch of Tata Indica cars. Yes, that was the first passenger car vehicle that the Tatas were producing and selling. And Hina will smile at this because her sister was there in Tata Motors at that time. And even before the first ad appeared, the day we announced the price of the vehicle, that was the first diesel vehicle, mind you, we got 120,000 bookings within 3 days with full check payments. Phenomenal, a miracle. Unfortunately, the plant had a capacity of only 60,000, so we had to return 60,000 checks. In terms of sales and market, and the first ad had not even appeared for the product. Of course, there were interviews, there was a lot of excitement, will the Tatas make it, etc., etc. They imported a second-hand plant of Nissan from Australia. Will it be able to make today's kind of car? The launch is a very different story, and that's probably for another day. But that was a huge challenge. Could we do it? And it did happen.
And then, therefore, did you also have to manage the crisis, given that, such a large number of acceptances that Tata had?
Such a large number of?
For the launch, there was such a large, contingency of people wanting to buy that car.
Oh, so. Absolutely. Managing those expectations. But fortunately, because it was on the bookings basis, it was only those. And the 60,000 again was chosen, not first come, first served, but by lots. So no one, because someone would say, look, I booked in Kanyakumari, and just because of the distance between Kanyakumari and Mumbai, I shouldn't be left out. So it was done by lots, fair and square, and all genuine buyers got it. I only wish they had that kind of success for a wonderful product called Nano.
So I have an interesting incident that I need to share with you.
Sure.
And this is when I was a journalist. I used to cover the banking sector then. And for some time, I was asked to cover the FMCG. And I knew nothing of FMCG, and I had to come, and I was told to do an interview with one of the multinational toothpaste brand that you were managing then. And I was just wondering what to do. But of course, I had to come in for the interview. So I did. But before that, you sat with me, and you took me through what the company was doing. And I was good enough to do the interview. In fact, I realized that you knew a lot more on the company. And so my question, therefore, is, why was this desire to always know more about and how does it help as a PR professional?
You know, today I was so impressed to see so much of knowledge being shared about research. 58 years ago, when I joined advertising, no one was interested in research. And I owe this to Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who set up the first market research firm in India called ORG. And he gave me full freedom to access whatever reports and whatever studies I would need for the launch of any of the consumer products, not only those belonging to the Sarabhais, but even of the other clients we handled. And then in 1964, when I went to the US on a scholarship, I had the privilege and honor of meeting Mr. Nielsen himself. And that was another education in itself. And as a result, having seen being able to reduce the chance factor, if I may put it that way, and made so sure of advertising success or PR success was something that I always wanted to do. And even in PR, 25 years ago, when I ventured into what was, I thought, full-time PR, but it was advertising always mixed with it. No, there was no such thing as research in PR. I had to go back to ORG, the ORG that had by then changed hands. It was part of the Business India group, and then it finally got merged with MARG. And he said, but Roger, we've never done PR research. And then it's the same inputs. I said, all right, there's no store audit, but let's do it. And we worked together. But today, I'm jealous of all of you. You all have all these tools. We never had them. But hats off to you all.
Sir, you're probably amongst the few that I know who's been in advertising and in PR. Which is the job that excited you the most?
To be honest, I never saw them as different disciplines. During my tenure with GWT, of course, there was no exposure to PR at all. But when I joined Shilpi, I think the first experience was in Bangalore, and the Sharavati project was being inaugurated. And in those days, life was very simple. You're doing an inauguration, you take an ad, full-page ad preferably, and automatically your story would be printed in the editorial columns, And that was the way, especially if the chief minister or the prime minister was going to inaugurate it. And that's what happened with Sharavati project, and so one used these two as complements, really. Incidentally, that was my first, I was 24 at that time, and thanks to that chief minister, I got my first taste of beer. He's the guy who really introduced me to Shandy, which is Kingfisher beer with Spencer's lemonade, if I remember correctly. And I also learned one thing. Can I talk off the record? Any journalists here?
So I'm an ex-journalist.
I also learned one thing, but 4 years later, that a driver can also become a union minister. And that's another story.
Yeah, but so which one did you like the most?
I'm talking to you sometime.
Okay, if I were to ask you, what's the one mistake that you would never like to repeat again?
One mistake. I think the first time around, I had an equity relationship with Burson Marsteller, okay? I was totally new to the industry, and Burson Marsteller was owned by Young and Rubicam. Young and Rubicam was an advertising agency, and in my ad agency, we worked very closely with Young and Rubicam, although we were not affiliated to them officially. They were affiliated with Rediffusion for Colgate. But a lot of their other accounts they shared with us, thanks to very strangely, a gentleman called Bill Mastella, who then happened to be a partner of Harold Burson. Well, that's another story again. You know? So Young and Rubicam really wanted me to join hands with them when I decided to quit. And I said, no, Arun Nanda is a very dear friend of mine. And in any case, I can't join, I can't continue in advertising. I have problems, as I mentioned. And therefore, they said, all right, why don't we introduce you to Harold Burson? And that's when I met Harold Burson. Strangely, this was in 1986 at the World Advertising Congress in Chicago, where Ed Ney, who was the chairman of Young and Rubicam, was the president of IAA. And I was one of the keynote speakers there. And I was introduced to PR at an advertising conference, and he introduced me to Harold Burson. And then we started affiliation, but I didn't know the business. And therefore, I needed the collaboration, the affiliation, and then when liberalization happened, we had a gentleman's agreement. I had 51%, they had 49%. But I think when Martin Sorrell bought over Burson Marsteller, and Martin wanted me either to sell out or buy him out. And I said, look, our relationship, because Young and Rubicam was employee-owned, which was a very different concept. And no one was making money out of each other. You know, we sold steak at par and we bought steak at par, stuff like that. But with Martin, and God bless him, you know, that's his way of business, so we decided to part as friends. But I think having learned the ropes, I shouldn't have gone into another relationship. And I think that's a mistake I made.
And therefore, what prompted you to choose Edelman?
Well, Alan van der Molen, who used to work with Burson Marsteller, quoted me in London, in New York, in Hong Kong. Wherever I went, he would come and meet me. After I moved to Edelman, let's join them, etc. That time, I think Edelman was linked with Prema, if am I right? Prema, are you here? I think it was with, they were linked with Genesis just after their relationship with MSL, I think it was. And so she was, they were parting and then they wanted to join hands. And I did. But I think I did that. That was a mistake.
Okay. Sir, if you had to choose a career today, would you still opt for PR or for advertising? And why so?
I'd do both, because as I mentioned, I've always done both, except for the JW days. Otherwise, I've always done both, and whichever works. Sometimes one works, sometimes the other works, and sometimes both work, with a whole lot of other combinations. But, you know, I used to be like a little schoolboy. Right up to the age of 70, I'd get up all excited about what I'm going to do that day. And so I loved every moment of it. And I had wonderful people to work with. And I met so many of them here today. And it has been so nice because, you know, after I quit Shilpi, I didn't meet anybody because, you know, the chapter's closed. But once I retired, all my colleagues at Shilpi, now we formed a WhatsApp group, and we exchange notes almost every day. And Ophira and I were discussing only yesterday that we should do the same as alumni, you know, and be in touch, because we had wonderful people. Most of them joined as trainees, and look at how well they're doing now. And I'm so proud.
Unfortunately, sir, today, like back in your days when, you know, one could do both advertising and PR, today there are clear divides. And while we all say integrated communication, there are still some silos that you work under. So if you had to do that, then what would that be?
Oh, I would fight it. I would fight the system. I'm a fighter, basically, you know, because Bill Bernbach was one of my advertising gurus. He always believed, and we used to chat a lot. He said the fundamental thing is to break all rules, and that's how you win. And he was so right, and it happens even today. I was advised against having that launch for Tata Indica. But I just fought it, got Mr. Ratan Tata on my side, and we won.
So, have you ever considered writing a book? You would have had so many experiences, anecdotes to share. Have you ever thought that you would?
Many, many times. And all my friends, my colleagues, former colleagues, in the 52 years that I was working, have been asking me, a lot of my friends, my problem is this, right through my career, I've worked very closely with industry leaders, with company CEOs. In PR, it's very common that you work with a company CEO, but I had that, a special relationship with a J.R.D. Tata or a Vikram Sarabhai, or whoever it was. And the result was that people opened their lives to me. And I would join them for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. And as a result, I am privy to a lot of secrets, which is why I'm scared of social media that, I might let out something. Sometimes in my sleep, I get up, and I dream that I have betrayed somebody, and then I realize, no, it's only a dream. And that's my biggest problem. So I might spill the beans, which is why I go up to a point, and then hold it back.
So, sir, are you on social media?
Sorry?
Are you on social media?
Only as a reader, not as a part. Let me tell you a story, for example. The last time I visited Jamshedpur was also the last time that Mr. J.R.D. Tata visited Jamshedpur. And this is way back, this is a few months before he died. And in those days, there was no such thing as, the way flying is today. You had to go by you got to go by plane to Jamshedpur and then take a train, to Calcutta and then take a train to Jamshedpur. He was probably chartering a plane for the first time to Jamshedpur. And only because he had fractured his thighs skiing. Mind you, at 87 he was skiing. Huh? And so he asked me, have you been to Jamshedpur recently? And honestly, I had never been to Jamshedpur. So I said, no, sir. He said, why don't you come? Would you like to come? So I said, love to. Accompany JRD and, the kind of stories you have, the exchanges we had. And he was a wonderful human being. I've got several stories, but let me share this one story with you. And I hope he's not going to get angry with me because he forbid me not to tell the story. This was, as I told you, he was 87 or 88 at that time. And he asked me, where would you like to go? Would you have any particular place to go? I said, yes, my friend Dini DeVitri, who used to be the CEO of Philip Morris in New York, and a very dear friend of mine because he was head of Godfrey Phillips and Philip Morris in India. And Dini told me that he grew up in Jamshedpur and that his house, his family house in Jamshedpur had been donated to Tata Steel Foundation, to the Tata Foundation. And he said, Roger, if you ever go to Jamshedpur, please have a look at it and tell me, how's it doing, So Mr. Tata said, yeah, of course I know it. I'll take you there. So he personally took me there. And then we moved around and saw, the very charitable foundation work that was going on there. And suddenly, he was taken aside and people started whispering in his ear. So I was wondering what happened. And I thought the previous year there was a fire when they celebrated Founders Day. So, and he was not able to go attend to it because he had fractured his thigh. So he wanted to so I thought maybe it was something like that. Then he says, Roger, if you don't mind, we're making a detour. So I said, detour? Sure, you don't know questions. And so we went there, and then we went to a small village outside Jamshedpur. All right? And there we saw an Adivasi woman with her child, almost naked, stagnating in a pool of urine and excreta. And she was chained to a tree. And whilst people were watching, no one dared help her. And I believe Only at night would the people from the nearby village feed her. Why? Because she had been raped by a mafia leader, and they were all scared of him. So Mr. Tata said, nothing doing. And mind you, at the age of 87, he bent down on one knee. His wonderful cream-colored safari suit got stained with that urine, and he personally unchained her. Then he comes to me, Roger, don't you dare talk to people about this. I've broken that promise today. But that was the kind of human being he was. And then, of course, he heard the news that Mr. Rusi Modi had tried to capture Tata Steel and appoint his own man, and that's another story again.
So you mentioned that you get up even today at 6 o'clock, and there's a lot that you're doing even today, and a large part of your life is right now doing a lot of charity work that you do. If you could tell us a little bit more in terms of something that you're doing there.
It's not really charity. It's I consider it giving back. Life is
Giving back to this world.
The country, the world, and people have given me a lot. I've been blessed, you know. So I felt I must give back. One of the major things I've been involved with is an organization called Mumbai First, which is to get private sector, the doyens of industry of Mumbai, Ad Factors works with us from time to time, and to get the city moving again. And we work very closely with the government of Maharashtra. We don't take credit for what we do, but silently we work. So a lot of my time goes there. In fact, the one card I use today is of that business card. That's all voluntary. So that's really to get the city moving. It's on the model of London First. Mr. Sushim Datta, who's to be the chairman of Hindustan Lever, started this organization. I'm still very close, and he and Keshav Mahendra, whom I'm also very close to, were involved in this. They did some pioneering work. So after we used to do pro bono work at Edelman and Roger Pereira Communications for them for years. And now I'm the vice chairman, non-executive, of course. And then, so that spends time. Then there's another one, a school in Western UP, where girls were never allowed to go to school, were never allowed to be educated. They ate what their brothers left over for them, and their brothers ate everything, then the poor girls would go hungry to bed. And they were married off as soon as they reached puberty, so that means they had their first child at the age of 11 or 12 or 13 or 14, and by the time they were 18, they had 4 to 5 children, begetting children in a manner of speaking. So we started a school there called PPVS, Pardada Pardadi Education Society. We bring the kids, the girls, to the school at 7:30 in the morning, give them breakfast, give them lunch, give them dinner, give them school education. Teach them to be self-sufficient, teach them a skill depending on what their talents are, computers, needlework, whatever. And if they don't get married, if they're still unmarried at the age of 18, on their 18th birthday, we give them 40,000 rupees. The school was started by Sam Virinder Singh. Thank you. In 2000, and in 18 years, only one girl has forfeited that 40,000. There are a whole lot of other projects, mentoring kids to become entrepreneurs, mentoring kids to join the civil services, mentoring kids to join the armed forces, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, which I couldn't join for whatever reason. Cancer research, cancer studies, building the quality movement. When I was in hospital in 2016, I was there for 31 and a half days, and I made a list of all the things I'm involved in, and at that time it was 39. They don't happen all the time.
That's really nice.
I'm enjoying
You're really busy. So, last question from my end before I, open the floor for questions. What advice would you give to us young professionals, from your experience?
Advice? Listening to you people, you have taken this whole business and profession to a whole new level. I think you guys have to give me advice on what I should be doing. You all have really revolutionized this. Just so different from what it was in my time, just 9 years ago. And so I'll have to sit with you guys to give me advice.
Okay, I think we have some 5 minutes. There, we can see someone.
Hello, sir. This is Prakriti. I am barely almost like 5 months now, I guess tomorrow, into the industry. And so Arva actually asked this right now, but people keep saying that the first 2 years are the foundation of what you do and how you go ahead. So I just wanted your perspective on how do I make these 2 years like a lasting foundation to be able to, leave a mark and someday get rid of AVE in the industry maybe.
I'm sorry, get rid of what?
AVE, the measurement we use.
Okay. Advertising equivalent.
That's a very difficult question. But if I don't want to sound simplistic, but the real thought, feedback is opportunities just fly by us. It's important for us to understand and anticipate and look out for them. And if we see an opportunity, grab it with both hands and do the best you can, with whatever way you can, and make the best of it. Like there is no tomorrow. Sorry, I don't think I've answered your question pointedly, but this would be my advice. Grab it, because opportunities don't come only to Arva or Roger, they come to all of us. The important thing is we have to keep our eyes, our ears, and our minds open and to look out for them. They come to each one of you. Most of us don't listen. Most of us are not waiting to look out for them.
Anyone? Yeah, there.
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to probably give you a bit of an anecdote. This is Dhruti, and I've been one of the fortunate few to have worked with Roger Pereira and his wonderful leadership team. When I started off my PR career almost 17 or 18 years ago, it makes me quite nostalgic when I think about it. But I think what I really learned, and I'd like to even give this as a tribute to you, Mr. Pereira, is the way we all used to sit down together in conference room, together with all senior leaders, Mr. Alvin Fernandez, may his soul rest in peace, Dorab, Sopariwala, Mr. Venkatchari, your marketing person, how can I?
Dr. Sudha Menon.
Yes, Dr. Sudha Menon and all of these other people together. And we, as junior executives at that time, got so many opportunities. Ofira will stand testimony to that as well, that all of us got great opportunities to work with them. I still remember doing a lovely campaign for Agni with Jason Dikuna on action for good governance and networking in India. And this was a campaign which was really done to eradicate corruption and ensure we had corrupt-free politicians who would govern Mumbai, govern the BMC in Mumbai. And that only goes to show you, and Roger had come up to me, I remember, and told me, pay special attention to that. Yeah? Yes, Amit, I hear you. So, Mr. Pereira, I just want to tell you that you've been a great inspiration. And if you were to say, just one word about how we stay relevant, please tell us what that may be.
Again, keep your eyes, ears, and your mind open to what's happening. That's the only way to see what are the trends, the current trends today, and be not 1 or 2, but 10, 15 steps ahead. Anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow. And that is very important. But Dhruti and each one of my colleagues, former colleagues I should say, correctly speaking, they were the pick. I couldn't have asked for a better group of people. And we really had the best. And thank you, Dhruti, for being with us.
So I can vouch
Yes.
for that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pereira. I belong to your generation, as it were, because accidentally I happened to be working at that time, and all the names that you mention are people that I have seen, worked with, breathed the same air with. So, a question that I have as an outsider is the brands that you worked with then, were they more heart-driven and more genuine and real than the brands that exist today, wherein you need image makers and storytellers to weave their story? Any reactions?
Did anyone recognize who that lady is? She was the voice on Doordarshan. Lady Simon and then Lady Khanna, right? Wow, we used to wait to listen to her. A lot of the brands are still there. The ones that didn't fulfill consumer promises have gone. One of the brands which was, there are about 38 patents in my name, and one of them is a product of the government of Maharashtra called Energy. It's another story, but it was an amazing case study, both in advertising as well as PR as well as distribution. Unfortunately, now that brand is a good brand, but you know what happens today. People get bought out, and the production has been killed by external forces. So that's one brand that did not deserve to lose out. In fact, we had dreams as to talk to Dr. Kurian about taking that brand nationally, although it was strictly not from the cooperative movement, and in principle he had agreed, and the GCCMF had agreed, etc. But politicians come in and unfortunately weak bureaucrats connive with the powers that should not be. And that's the story. But otherwise, all the good brands, yes. But the ones that didn't deserve to be there, because a lot of brands existed at that time, they were not really brands, they were products. They were products because our economy was controlled. You could produce only as much as the government allowed you to produce, irrespective whether it was cost efficient or not. And that's why, the better man wins, or the better product wins, or the better lady wins. And that's what's happened.
Okay. I think
We've
that's
run
it.
out of time.
Yeah, you have. Thank you very much, sir. It's been indeed a very pleasure.
And Jai Praxis and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen,
So they'd like a
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
an absolute pleasure and absolute honor. Thank you so much, Mr. P. Thank you.